So I would really like to talk to you about Recipe Mate, and I actually first met you during the process that you were applying for the Black Valley Accelerator Program.
Yeah.
So could you give us a little introduction into what you've been building so far?
Yeah, of course. So I'm currently building a platform called Recipe Mate, and we're basically tackling inaccessible recipes and giving disabled users the confidence and independence to cook. And this idea actually came about by accident, but on purpose.
There's a theme here.
Yeah, accidentally on purpose. And this is the funny thing. I think we'll touch on it later on with like being neurodivergent. Like it literally is an accident for us half the time, because of just how society functions. But essentially, my last role, I wasn't happy in that role, and I had hit like a breaking point where nothing was clicking for me. My ADHD symptoms were getting really intense, and I was just looking for something to just keep me engaged, even outside of work hours. So someone sent me a link to a hackathon that was being sponsored by Deaf Blind UK, which is a charity catered to deafblind community. And I was like, do you know what? I've just had like a mental breakdown this whole week. I just need something to look forward to. Maybe this is interesting. I can learn something from this. And I signed up. And, you know, we were in our teams and there were a bunch of problem statements. And I remember reading some of the problem statements and I just saw the one that said food and I was like, yeah, we're going this one. Which is quite ironic because at the time, my eating patterns and my relationship with food was heavily impacted by my mental health and my ADHD. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe this could be something that I could solve. And it'll be fun because like, oh, there's people that go through something similar, even though we don't have the same disability. So we did in the weekend, we were like, okay, this is a problem statement we're tackling. And the problem statement was literally like a lot of our users in our community don't feel confident enough to cook on their own because instructions aren't clear. They tend to feel isolated because they're not encouraged to be involved with cooking for themselves as a life skill. So that's how Recipe Mate was actually born. It was tackling that problem statement where unclear instructions, so inaccessible instructions, is one aspect that we're tackling. And then there's also the technical side of, you know, blogs online, just cluttered information, pop-up ads, poor contrast, poor text size, things like that, video tutorials with no captions. So that was basically all we're tackling. And we thought of, okay, we could just do video tutorials and just go from there. But what if we actually reframe the way we approach writing recipes or following recipes online? And an example I would give is, let's say you've got an instruction that says saute the onions until they go brown. You and I, and you know, we can all understand that for the most part, but there's people that won't be able to know when the onions have gone brown because they can't gauge that. Yeah. So you now need to tweak the instruction and be like, okay, maybe we, instead of talking about how it would look visually, we could think about, you know, potentially setting a timer or potentially thinking about how they engage with their current cooking equipment, if they do, and adjusting it for that. And we wanted to approach it from the aspect of recipes because we like to follow TikTok videos with food, you know, recipe instructions on food blogs, YouTube videos. So it's like, if we can start from there and, you know, see how we can make that process more accessible, that will tackle the problem of like not having the independence to cook because it's not there catered for you. And then it's much easier to focus on, you know, the things like websites not being accessible, like food checkouts not being accessible. So that's how literally Recipe Mate was born. And we were literally tackling that problem statement over that weekend in that hackathon. And like the live stream is out there on YouTube. Oh, wow. And I even remember that pitch night because my mental health actually hit a low. Like I actually had a panic attack that same day. I was in a very, very toxic work situation. And that night I was actually about to like drop out and just not do the pitch. But I cared about the idea so much. And I was like, you know what? Let the judges hear it at least. Let me just have one good thing happening that day. And I remember we were pitching it and presenting. And the judges' feedback was actually longer than our presentation. Oh, wow. They were going on and on and on. They were so excited by it. They're like, oh my gosh, I could share this with my friend's son and that could teach him how to make a cup of tea on his own for his mom. Like, I could see this being used in supermarkets. I'm like, I'm listening to all this feedback and obviously it's all virtual. So I'm just there like on mute, just crying my eyes out because I'm like, this is actually a problem that I'm solving for myself. And like, people are actually gonna like this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like it was literally that moment the penny dropped. I was like, oh my gosh, this could be something that actually I can actually do for myself and for other disabled people like me. And yeah, like we didn't win because they were looking for something more different, but they were literally like, please carry on building this, because the excitement on their face, like I'll send the link, but
Yeah, please send
the
link.
excitement
It's
on their
the show
face,
notes.
I was just like so taken back. I was like, oh my gosh, they actually love this. Like me and my team members were also hyped, and like 2 of them are still part of the current team of
that's
Recipe Mate.
amazing.
Yeah, like it just made me realize like, oh my gosh, I could actually combine all the things I'm passionate about and actually solve a problem that I was experiencing myself, even though the whole hackathon was around deaf and blind users. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Like people talking about like, oh, I could share this with my partner and we can do date night together. I could like, you know, it can help me food shopping. And it was just giving us so much ideas, and like that dopamine hit. My ADHD brain was like, yes, I needed this. I needed this positive feedback.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, like I just remember that night, like it was just so, I just sat there after the whole thing ended and I was like, I think I might have accidentally found something to solve.
Yeah, definitely. So but there's having an idea, there's hearing good reception, and then there's like taking the dive and the plunge into, I'm going to pursue this full time and actually give it my best shot. How did you do that bit?
I literally thought that was the only good thing that was happening for me at that time. Even to this day. So it was literally like in that moment, for me, I had no like backup plan. I had no like, you know, bank of mum and dad, like, hey, I'm just exploring this, give me some time. It was literally like, I'm in such a toxic work environment that my health is impacted. And this is the one thing that's making me feel good right now. I couldn't see anything else. It was just like, I need to find a way to first get out of this toxic environment. I don't know what that's going to look like for me financially, physically, mentally. But all I was thinking at that time was like, I need to fix my health. I need to rest and recuperate. And I want to build this thing out. Because in that moment, it made me realize like food is fun. And that fun has been robbed away from me because of like my whole situation. And this has just given me the spark to actually do something with it. And I've always loved food. I didn't realize that people actually care about my food opinions. It got me verified.
Yeah, exactly. It's all connected.
Yeah. So in that moment, it was just intense. And it was just like, I don't have any other choice in terms of what's making me feel good but to pursue this. I never set out to be a founder. I never set out to be like a business owner or anything. I have teased the idea of entrepreneurship, but it was in something completely different. It was something that I wanted to do just for fun rather than it has to be my living. And yeah, this has all happened like end of December last year. So it wasn't even that long ago. And I don't know, that night, it was just like, I finished that pitch night. I just cried. And that sounds really dramatic. I cried myself and just slept. And I woke up the next day, I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. And obviously it was a long process because my whole work situation, and I had to sort out my health. I was going back and forth with my doctors and everything. And that's where the whole traveling thing came about. It was like, I need to first rest and reset. Like, I'm not turning 24 sad like this. Like I just needed a change of environment. So yeah, I went traveling. And it's interesting because even with traveling, I found myself talking about this app. Like what I like to do when I travel is I like to ask people different things that they're making, which is why I love Thailand, because they would even bring me to the back of the kitchen and show me the process. I've always loved exploring flavors, something I just do for fun. So this whole thing just came back. I feel like a lot of what I'm going through just come back to full circle mode. And it's just me like finally acknowledging and tapping into like all my childhood interests.
Yeah.
Which seems to be a very common theme with people who have ADHD.
Yeah.
We're kind of like just tapping into like inner child wounds and stuff. And I feel like that's what's been happening to me within the tech space. And that's basically what happened with Recipe Mate. I just feel like I'm combining accessibility, tech in general, and my passion for food. And I'm just seeing it as like this one big thing that I'm solving for myself and having fun with it.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So did you always have a feeling that you'd eventually be an entrepreneur? And do you feel like you demonstrated entrepreneurial traits from when you were younger and like throughout your like career journey?
It's so funny because I was actually that kid in secondary school that sold cookies, donuts, crisps, Lucozade on sports day. I was really that kid. And it was just for me like solving this whole thing where it's like, oh, you know what? I'm the eldest. I don't want my mom panicking about giving me that £2 pocket money for lunch. And one day I was like, you know, I don't want school dinners, and I don't want these jam donuts from Tesco. So I just accidentally sold it to my friends. I'm like, listen, 30p each. And then I saw the money that I'm making. I'm like, you know what? I can get chicken and chips with a drink after school with this.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day where chicken and chips was actually affordable.
It was like I used to get
£1, 3 wings and chips.
4 wings and chips.
Yeah.
Like, I was always in the chips.
And I remember I was so hyped. I was like, wow, I really flipped that £2 coin my mom gave me, and I can get 2 for 2 of a drink.
Mm-hmm.
And then since then I was like, you know what, let me try it. And I didn't tell my mom for ages until one day she saw so many coins in my bag. She's like, are you okay? Like, what's going on here? And then I told her what I was doing. So yeah, technically there was that. Even at school, there's always like these business competitions and stuff like that, and I always was the team lead for stuff like that. But you don't think about that in the moment where you're constantly just trying to work and pay bills and stuff. It's only in hindsight they're like, wait, the signs were always there. I was very much an advocate type person, school council member. I was the student in class where people would report to me so I can explain to the teachers or the head of year. I was always paired up with the quiet kids because I was so chatty. And like even all the kids that, I really hate this term now that I'm aware of it, but special needs kids, I was always paired up with them because for some reason they clicked with the way I explained things. So it was just, it really is all like a childhood thing. And entrepreneurship, it's not even that I was trying to pursue entrepreneurship. I kind of always knew that just based on how I am as a person and how people just talk about me or they're drawn to me, it just felt like, I don't know if I'm suited to just be a clog in a machine. Not that there's anything wrong with it, because for some people it works great, but I just feel like for me, my brain is just so everywhere that I just knew, I don't know what this is going to look like, but it can't just be day in and day out just doing something. And it's not even the whole like working for other people. I have no problem working for other people. You know, I freelance, I contract. It's not that deep. I think for me, it was just like, there's just a lane that I know I'm supposed to carve out for myself. I don't know what that looks like, but I just want it to be fun. Like learning about my ADHD has made me realize that I'm driven by fun.
Yeah.
It sounds so cheesy and hippie, but I'm driven by fun. When I feel like, you know, like the thought of knowing that I've helped someone or made their life easier or just opened up a door for them that they were struggling with, that is fun for me. Like I enjoyed that so much. And if I can do that with food, that's even better, because food intrinsically, it brings people together. You know, it can get you through some tough times.
Yeah.
So it's like, I actually love the fact that I've accidentally gone full circle in this type of space. Like it's a crazy feeling, because I'm like in the most uncertain time of my life, but I'm also a step closer to being sure of what I want to do.
Yeah.
So everything's up in the air, but I'm okay with it, which is scary.
No, that's great. And I think it's really, really admirable that you're using your neurodivergence, which is something that should put you, or typically puts people at a disadvantage. And you're actually using that as a hack to be able to empower yourself and empower others and drive your own success.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's literally my way of survival at this point. Like, and I think a lot of neurodivergent people say the same thing. Like, it takes a lot from us emotionally and physically, to just push through and just about survive. And then society will see it as like a quirk or a little funny little trait. And there's even a privilege in being able to get to that point, to be honest. I think that's been the biggest challenge. Like, there's a lot of things I love about being neurodivergent, but ADHD is such a tough condition to manage. Like, I have to live with this for the rest of my life. And it's like, I'm currently going through this process where I feel like I'm mourning a version of myself, because it's like, I had those traits, but I wasn't aware of it until so recently. Yeah. So it's like you go through this process where you're like sitting there thinking, was this me, or was this me when I was masking or just trying to survive?
Yeah.
There's that. I'm currently experiencing that disconnect. Even when I was traveling, I was like, I don't remember this version of me where I was this carefree or this like properly happy and just going for it. Like, I feel like there's a shift. And so you go through this process where you're happy and relieved that finally you know what was going on all along. You know that this is what your brain is literally wired for. But then you also go through this process where you're just angry and hurt, because it's like, wow, like so many adults failed me, you know, like, damn.
Yeah.
And then you're constantly questioning, like, wait, so when I was like this, was this authentic me, or was this authentic me with ADHD that I didn't know about, that I was masking?
Yeah.
So I'm currently going through that phase. It's so trippy.
It is. And I think another thing that's really difficult with it, because I'm going through a similar thing now, is kind of like mourning the fact that the younger version of myself didn't have the help that she needed, and how much would I have been able to achieve had I had that support.
That word potential, I'm so sick of it. Like, I'm so sick of constantly being told, like, oh my gosh, you have so much potential. If you just did this, if you just put your mind to it, and you're just there like, even like to this day, like a promise I made to myself is like, I've just decided, like, I'm going to stop people in their tracks when they try to sell the motivation that I already have for myself back to me. Because what I found is that I feel like I'm at this crossroad career-wise, where it's like, I know where I'm heading, but there's still so much uncertainty, and I'm okay with that. But then what happens is that people will see that. They'll be like, oh, you're so inspirational, you're so this, you're so that. And then they just start giving you a TED talk about your potential. And it's like, you do realize that you just said that you're inspired by me. So I know that I'm heading in the right direction. I know I'm motivated. I know I'm driven. Otherwise, we wouldn't be connected. But you're just taking everything that I feel and just shoving it back to me when you could actually help me. I know it sounds weird, but it's like, something that I've started to notice a lot in like the past 2 years, where it's like, stop selling me the drive that I already have for myself back to me. Yeah. Like, listen to what I've got to say and like mentor me, coach me, teach me things that I don't know, but don't just, you know, throw empty words at me. Because especially when you have ADHD, it's like, we take things so literal sometimes, and the way we regulate our emotions and we process and we communicate, it can be very difficult when you're constantly trying to read between the lines. And that's something that I didn't know that I was being frustrated at until this year. So I just promised myself, like, if people keep coming into my DMs or like into my inbox telling me like, oh, you know, I'm an investor XYZ, or I'm this and that, and I can coach you and mentor you, but all you're doing is just giving me TED Talks, is like, I'm so sorry. I appreciate the kind words, but leave me alone.
Something else I've seen you talk about a lot is like being able to ask for help authentically now, and that's something you've been doing a lot more.
Yes. Oh, that's one of the most liberating feelings, and this is why I love my team so much right now. Because we had 2 new people that joined, and they're like mentees on the Black Valley program, but like the career one. Got 2 new people, and even though they're like, oh, I'm learning so much from you, I'm sitting here like, I'm learning so much from you. Being able to freely delegate without feeling guilt is one of the best feelings ever. That's the stuff they don't tell you in these like motivational get rich quick schemes. They don't tell you that they delegate half the stuff that they're bragging about. And for me, even just as a Black woman, like, we're so used to just being told like, oh, we're just strong, like, just handle it, like, just, you know, look at you, powerful, independent. It's like, no, I actually want to be a soft baby girl. Like,
we need that soft life.
Now I'm at the point where it's like, listen, I need help. Obviously, like, it doesn't take away from your drive and your ambition. And I think that's something that I'm still working through, because what I've noticed with my ADHD is that we tend to overthink about how we're being perceived. Like, and it's 2 extremes. I go through a phase where it's like, I've just asked something from this person. How are they interpreting this? Because I struggle to pick up on people's tones anyway, unless I hear it or when I see you. And then there's the other aspect where it's like, I don't actually know how people view me. Or like, even if I was aware of it, I don't think I process it in the same way as everyone else seems to, which is something I was talking about recently on my Twitter, actually. And so I'm just at the point where it's like, you're either going to say yes or no. And it's so much harder to practice that in real life. But what my team is currently teaching me is like, you know, they're happy to take on things that I don't actually need to take on. And like, they're helping me distinguish between what different roles are like when you're building out a startup. They're helping me think about the ways I'm going to have to implement processes when I expand and, you know, be in a good position to hire disabled employees. That'll be like a dream for me, to be able to hire people that are constantly pushed aside and not given a chance. Like, I want to be able to make sure that when I get to that point where I can take a chance on someone, that I'm doing it properly. And I think to get to that point, I need to start unlearning some of the things that I've been holding in, like, you know, taking on all these roles and constantly just balancing things, constantly feeling like if I can't juggle everything, then, you know, I'm an imposter.
Yeah.
So yeah, this year it's just been about like delegating and just focusing on the things that you're good at, which is easier said than done.
No, but you're doing well. You're doing really
amazing.
Well.
Get your teas out, because it's time for What's the Tech Tea?
I'm ready for this one.
Amina, can you share something controversial within the tech industry?
A lot of people that talk about imposter syndrome in the tech space aren't actually experiencing imposter syndrome. I say this because I used to think for the longest that I was suffering from imposter syndrome, but I actually wasn't. I was just in terrible environments, poor management, and experiencing either a combination of racism, sexism, every ism-ist you can think of. And I say this because I've been in a lot of spaces, or, you know, I have mentees who reach out to me like, oh, I don't feel like I belong. And one thing I like to tell people is like, okay, you say you feel like you don't belong, you feel like an imposter. Let's break down what aspects in your job role, in your environment, that's making you feel like this. And what I find, even when it's just people tweeting and stuff, what I find is that what they're experiencing is an environment that's not facilitating their growth. It's not actually imposter syndrome.
Wow.
And the reason why I say this is because imposter syndrome, by definition, you know, when you think about it, it's you're in the right environment. You've got supportive people in your life. You've got people that are affirming you. You know, you've got your qualifications. You've got everything you need, but you still feel nervous despite that. You're not an imposter if, you know, the barriers are already being closed before you can even enter. Even when you are let in, you know, you're being made to suffocate and navigate all these weird boundaries that aren't actually normal, and you're doing too much reading in between the lines. Of course you're going to feel like an imposter. It's not something that you are suffering from. It's something that's being done to you. And so that's why, like, I've literally been like, team, you're not imposter. You're not an imposter. Like, you're actually not. You're in the right place. And
Wow.
It leads on to this whole thing that I'm starting to have a bit of a, I don't know if it's an issue or it's just something that rolls me off the wrong way. But when people talk about break into tech, what are you breaking into? Because, like, numbers wise in this country, there's more jobs that need to be filled than people qualified for it. So you're not breaking into anything really. Like, you're not breaking down much. You're just entering a space. So that's just me being really nitpicky. But I say this about imposter syndrome, not just in tech, but in general. But because a lot of the people that talk about imposter syndrome and they're nervous and scared about it tend to be people from minority communities. And it's not lost on me that the stats around, you know, hiring people from minority backgrounds versus what people are experiencing and feeling being brushed under imposter syndrome, there's a correlation there. Like, you know, we can't talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and seeing how far those efforts are going and not also spot the trend in how many people from those communities that you're supposedly advocating for experiencing what they think is imposter syndrome, but it's not.
Yeah.
So I'm literally like, this year I'm gonna be on a rampage. Like, listen, think twice. Are you actually experiencing imposter syndrome, or are you being made to feel like an imposter? And the reason why that framing is important is because it goes from you blaming yourself and you seeing yourself as the root of the issue versus actually there's systems in place that are failing you. And a lot of people are being failed and being made to feel like an imposter. And thirdly and lastly, what's the issue about you being an imposter? Sorry, have you seen those Netflix documentaries of people scamming their way in different spaces?
It's so
Tinder swindler. What was the other one? The
Tinder swindler, the Anna babe. Like, I'm so sorry.
Bad vegan, yeah. Anna
Bad
Delvey.
vegan. It's like, I'm so sorry. There's people out here navigating these spaces, scamming their way on empty promises. And you're sitting there thinking that you're an imposter because you've worked your ass off. And yeah, you don't know everything, but who starts off in any industry knowing everything?
Yeah.
You're going to learn, and you're probably way ahead than you think. And if you're not, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that and picking up the slack. If you're failing a little bit right now, cool. You know that now. Do something about it. So yeah, I'm team. Make sure you actually know what imposter syndrome is, because I genuinely think that a lot of people that talk about it don't actually know what it is.
Because that's the thing. If you're framing it in the way that it's your fault, you're going to focus on fixing yourself and you know, trying to work on your confidence. And your confidence isn't the issue, is it? It's not your technical abilities either.
And even if you're not up to scratch just yet, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, what becomes the end of the world is if you're genuinely like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not being honest about myself, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole other aspect. That is still not imposter syndrome. Because imposter syndrome is literally like, everything around you is great, right support system, right everything, but you still feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. That's something that you unpack in therapy. That's a completely different situation than what I hear people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So like, whenever I'm in these spaces, I'm like, can you tell me what imposter syndrome actually is? Like, what do you think imposter syndrome is? And by the time they've finished explaining it, it's like, well, can you see now how people are failing you here? Can you see now how different systems are failing you?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you actually the imposter in this situation?
Wow. Where's
That's the tea.
Where's the imposter? Wow, that is the tea. Like, so before, me and Jessie were looking to an article that actually speaks about this, like, stop telling women that they have imposter syndrome, and basically was outlining the fact that some of the systems are just failing us, and that's more the root. So it was great to hear your opinion on that. I know. But we have 4 minutes.
Okay, then
so
let's...
Do you want to wrap up?
Yeah.
Are you happy to wrap up? Is there anything else you want to add?
I'm good.
I love that controversial take.
It's so good.
It's so good, because we were talking about it and I was like, let me do some research. Let me just read up on this. I was so happy I found that article. And yeah, very, very interesting.
It's something that we don't necessarily have to keep in, but the whole... the thing that I have a problem with is people being sold coaching based on imposter syndrome, and then putting the kind of financial burden on the individual. Yeah. And that's a bit of a dodgy area.
Because you can be the most confident person. I'm noticing this in the startup space. You know, how many black women are going abroad, overseas to get funding? They have the numbers. They've got the market. It's a right product fit. How are you then an imposter when you tick off all the boxes? Do you know what I mean? So
okay.
Interesting one.
Right. Before we get kicked out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on here. We've loved to hear a lot about your journey, the banter, the lessons.
And all of the resources that you've mentioned as well will be in the show notes. Could you just let our listeners and watchers know where we can follow you?
I think, honestly, the best way to find out all my other resources is through Twitter. So my @ is YeahSheWrites. So YeahSheWrites.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Amina.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's Glowing in Tech episode with Amina, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Join us next week as we meet Zoe Nengate, who works as a technical lead at Palantir Technologies in London.
There was only 2 boys.
That's so rare.
in the class. And